Dear students, this is Dr. Pooja Thakkar, a biology expert. We are in the sixth session of cell biology, that's on plastids. Plastids are basically found in plant cells and in various euglenoids. These are the semi-autonomous organelles which are surrounded by double membrane envelope, and as per need they do multiplication by the process called fission. Okay, now what are they basically? They are basically of three types. The first category is chloroplast, which is uh, which can be commonly heard by all of you. That is giving typically a green color to the plant, right? So these chloroplast contains chlorophyll pigments in them, as well as certain kinds of carotenoids in them. The other category is called chromoplast. They usually contains a high concentration of carotene as well as xanthophylls. And the last category is called leucoplast, which are the colorless plastid. They are mainly involved in the storage purpose. While the chromoplast, as the name indicate, chrome is for color. They are imparting certain kinds of color to the developing plant features. Now we'll go in detail in one by one. The first one is chloroplast. They are green colored plastids. They contain chlorophylls, that is chlorophyll A as well as chlorophyll B, that traps the solar energy for the process of photosynthesis, and they do temporarily or permanently store the material called starch, which is the storage product, or you can say the final product of photosynthesis that has been stored in the chloroplast. In higher plants, they are typically disc-like. They are the second largest organelle, and in the alga, they are the largest organelle. Right. While when we focus on the structure, the outer membrane is comparatively very smooth, that will regulate the passage of many of the material between the organelle as well as the cytoplasm. The inner membrane also runs parallel to the outer membrane. In compared to mitochondria, as we have seen, the outer membrane is continuous, whereas the inner membrane is forming the infoldings called cristae. Here both the membranes, that is the outer membrane as the inner membrane, are parallel to each other. Now what do you mean by thylakoid, which is labeled here? So the thylakoid is the third membranous unit, which is a disc-like structure present into the fluid of chloroplast. The fluid inside is called stroma. So stroma is the liquid into which you can find certain kind of stacks. The stacks you can be able to notice here are called grana. The individual stack is called, the single stack is called granum. The single stack granum is having certain disc-like structures called thylakoid. Okay, so thylakoid is forming a stack which is called granum, and overall the granum is considered as grana. Now you can see the interconnections between the granum. Those are the extensions, which are in the technical term called lamellae, which are deeped into the fluid, as you can see here. These are the connections which are connecting various granum together, but they are deeped into the fluid called stroma. So these kinds of lamellae can be considered as stromal lamellae. Okay, now internally this kind of fluid, which is stroma, is also having the chloroplast's own DNA, 70 as ribosomes, starch grains, as well as various enzymes which are involved in the Calvin cycle. We will discuss this Calvin cycle in future when we talk about photosynthesis, that is the physiological process of this particular leaf. Okay, so stroma also contains varieties of enzymes which are needed for the synthesis of proteins as well as carbohydrates. So based on that, what you can say, that chloroplasts are during the course of evolution, initially in the premature condition, they are serving as photosynthetic bacteria. As in the case of mitochondria, we have discussed mitochondria were initially served as aerobic bacteria, while these kinds of chloroplasts are mainly serving as photosynthetic bacteria. But during the formation of the developed cells called the eukaryotic cells, by chance they get entered into the plant cell as well as certain alga, and they become the permanent part of them, and then they are considered as chloroplast, which bear varieties of chlorophyll. Now as I talk about chlorophyll, where exactly the chlorophyll molecules are present, you can see the thylakoid structure or the granum. Into these kind of disc shaped structure, various pigments are scattered, and they trap the solar energy for the process of photosynthesis to store glucose or starch in them. So these kinds of stacks are the storage site for the starch. Now the thylakoids, as we discussed, are the bag-like structure. They are lined by membrane. At many places they form stack called grana. They are 40 to 60 in number per chloroplast. In singular, this kind of grana is called granum. Now each granum may bear nearly 10 to 100 numbers of thylakoids. That means one stack is having 10 to 100 thylakoids. The thylakoid, as I talked about, contain or bear chlorophyll pigments called chlorophyll A as well as chlorophyll B, as well as the other kinds of pigments called carotenoids as well as xanthophylls as the photosynthetic pigments, typically in the higher plant to trap solar energy, and the final product is starch, but simultaneously they are also forming certain energy packets in the form of ATP as well as NADPH. So this is the overall process of photosynthesis, in which you will be able to notice a plant, typically a sunflower plant with the leaf. As we go on in detail, we have to take the cross section of that particular leaf, which bear the yellow colored cells called mesophilic cells. Into that you will be able to notice green colored dotted structures. Those are called chlorophyll. So now you will get the idea, sorry, chloroplast. So now you will get the idea that where exactly these kinds of chloroplasts are present. They are present in mesophilic cells of the leaf, and they are many in number. As per the process of photosynthesis, they'll accumulate more and more starch in them. Now for the photosynthesis process, what we need to understand here, that the plant will need carbon dioxide as well as the water molecule to synthesize sugar, that is glucose molecule, which is C6H12O6. So the basic component are C, H and O. So now where these kinds of components are coming, you will be able to notice stomata here, which are green colored structure, right? And they are typically serving as pores through which the carbon dioxide can enter into the leaf, and water is sucked up by the process called root suction process. So the particular plant will be having water from the xylem as well as CO2 from the stomata. Now, this particular kind of mesophilic cells cross section has been shown here, into which the chloroplast has been seen. And the chloroplast, as we have already discussed, it is having varieties of organs in them, as it is a biggest organelle. So they'll contain many of the components. The main component is thylakoid. If you can see the cross section of thylakoid, it will look like this. Okay, so these are mainly involved in the photosynthesis process, and the thylakoid will store the end product of photosynthesis, that is in the form of starch. Now when we talk about chromoplast, these chromoplast or the plastids are rather than green in color due to the presence of certain other kinds of pigments called carotenoids, but they lack chlorophyll pigments. These are of various colors because of the presence of various kinds of pigments present in them. They provide yellow, orange and red colors to different parts of the plants, like typically fruits as well as vegetables. For example, if you can see red chilies and tomatoes. Now the next and the last category is leucoplast. These are the colorless plastids which are of various shapes, which are mainly involved in the storage of food material. Typically, the carbohydrate storing material is called amyloplast, When these kinds of leucoplasts are storing oils, they'll called alioplast, and when they are storing proteins, they'll be considered as eluroplast. Okay, so this is the overview of that overview of the plastids. The basic unit which are basically involved in the plastid formation is proplastid, from which the etioplastid has been formed, that will form the chloroplast. From chloroplast, certain kind of chromoplast can also form. These kinds of chloroplast as well as leucoplast are directly formed from the proplastid also, without the need of etioplast. These leucoplasts, as we discussed, they are basically of three types. That is, if they are storing carbs, they are called amyloplast. If they are storing oil, you can see oil droplets in yellow color, they are called elioplast. And the plastid which is storing protein in them, that is called proteinoplast, or as we discussed, it is eluroplast. So this is all about plastids. If you have any doubts, you can have your questions in the comment box below. This is Dr. Pooja Thakkar, I have told. You can contact on the number also, that is 990-980-4647 for your queries. Thank you so much. Kindly do like the video and subscribe the channel. Thank you.